Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're doing something really cool. We're going to use the absolutely breathtaking miniature paintings of the Mughal Empire as a sort of time machine to decode their fashion history. I mean, think about it. How did their clothing reflect changing cultures, high-stakes politics, or even, believe it or not, astrology? Well, the Mughals left us this stunning visual record to answer exactly that. Let's get into it.
Here's a quick look at our agenda for today's Explainer. We'll trace the golden age of art, look at how these paintings acted as fashion records, check out the foundational styles of Babur and Humayun, explore Akbar's cultural fusion, hit the peak of Mughal luxury, and then wrap up by completely deconstructing a classic royal wardrobe.
Kicking things off with Section 1, A Golden Age of Art, covering the era from 1526 to 1737.
We're talking about a span of over 2 centuries here, from Babur's arrival back in 1526 all the way through to Aurangzeb's later reign. Fashion in the Indian subcontinent evolved, well, dramatically. And it's fascinating because each of these 6 rulers brought their own distinct tastes, their specific political strategies, and entirely new artisans to the royal court. You see, the Mughals didn't just show up and rule. They brought this incredibly rich, highly developed Persian heritage right along with them. We're talking revolutionary techniques in metalcraft, intricate glass engraving, and carpet weaving. They literally laid the foundation for craft traditions that honestly are still alive today. But for our purposes, the absolute game changer was their introduction of the legendary miniature painting style.
Moving right along to Section 2, Paintings as Fashion Records, basically the historical lookbook.
Now, since there obviously weren't any cameras back then, these miniature paintings stepped up to function as meticulously detailed fashion records. I mean, the artists painstakingly rendered the most exquisite details of medieval Indian costumes, the fabrics, the ornaments. It's because of these artists that we know exactly what the emperors and the royal court looked like, literally right down to the tiny embroidery on their shoes. It's pretty amazing.
That brings us to Section 3, Babur and Humayun and their Persian roots.
So the empire's founder, Babur, actually documented his own fashion in his autobiography, which gives us this incredible vocabulary of early Mughal garments. He talked about wearing things like the nimsha, which is kind of a short tunic, or the postin, a really warm sheepskin-lined coat. And if you look at these pieces, they heavily resembled the styles from his home in Central Asia. The vibe here was functional, robust, and, for sure, very Persian.
And here is where the painters captured a really fascinating cultural contrast. While everyday folks kept wearing indigenous clothing, like short wraparound dhotis, the people who adopted the new, fancy court garments had very distinct ways of wearing them. Get this. Hindus would fasten the tie cords of their outer garments toward the left armpit, while Muslims fastened the exact same style of garment toward the right armpit. It's such a tiny, almost missable detail, but it perfectly shows how clothing immediately communicated identity back then.
Then we get to Babur's son Humayun. Now, if you think people today are obsessed with their closets, you have to hear this. Humayun took his wardrobe so seriously that he kept a special, dedicated treasure house in his palace just to hold his textiles and garments. But wait, it gets better. He actually sought the help of planetary movements to pick out his daily outfits. Seriously, his clothing wasn't just a personal style choice, it was quite literally astrological alignment. How wild is that?
Let's transition to Section 4, Akbar's cultural style fusion, or unifying the wardrobe.
So, when Akbar the Great takes the throne, fashion does a total 180. It transforms from just being personal or astrological into a massive, powerful tool for cultural fusion and political unity. He actively embraced indigenous styles, totally blending Hindu and Muslim elements to create highly specific royal uniforms. He adopted Rajput dress elements and was famous for loving super vibrant colors. We're talking bright yellows, oranges, and purples. He even standardized a garment called the takuchiya jama, mandating that it have a round skirt and tie on the right. Basically, Akbar wasn't just dressing himself, he was quite literally designing a unified visual identity for his entire empire. A real game changer.
All right, moving into Section 5, the peak of Mughal luxury, the golden age of textiles.
By the time we hit the reigns of Jahangir and Shah Jahan, fashion had reached an absolute peak of opulence. We're talking heavy floral embellishments and gold thread everywhere. Jahangir actually started the trend of printing and embroidering beautiful, vibrant Kashmiri flora directly onto the textiles. And then by Shah Jahan's reign, the garments became just astonishingly lavish.
I mean, they were designing fabrics with a pietra dura effect. That means the cloth was woven and decorated to literally mimic the look of inlaid precious gemstones. Just next-level luxury. Now for our final stop, Section 6, Anatomy of a Mughal Wardrobe, where we'll deconstruct the classics.
If we were to crack open a typical 17th century Royal Mughal closet, the absolute most defining piece of menswear you'd find is the jama. It was this magnificent, long, gown-like coat. But what really made it stand out were the sleeves. They were incredibly long and tapering and designed specifically so that when you push them up your arm, they formed these beautiful, tight, bracelet-like folds at the wrists. Interestingly enough, among Hindus, a very similar garment was known as the angaraka, which translates, rather beautifully, I think, to protector of the body. Now, for the royal women, the essential garment was the peshwas. Think of a stunning, full, ankle-length robe or gown. But remember, this is being worn in the often sweltering heat of India, right? So to deal with that, it was crafted from incredibly fine, delicate, almost translucent materials. They'd beautifully layered over trousers, which basically created this perfect blend of modesty and supreme elegance.
But hey, they weren't just about looking good while lounging in the palace. They were highly practical too, inventing some incredibly specialized outerwear. For example, they had the chakmen, which was an actual raincoat made of Daraya wax cloth, super light and completely waterproof. They also had the autumn suk, a long, loose overcoat for the winter chill, and full head-to-foot travel garments to protect their outfits from all the road dust. Oh, and Jahangir? He had this specific, extremely rare overcoat that he wore, which was simply called the Najoy, which literally translates to rarity. Pretty fitting, right?
So you see, the fabrics they chose, or even just the way they tied a simple knot, spoke absolute volumes about who they were. And that leaves me with a question to wrap up our explainer today. If future historians didn't have a single photograph and they only had paintings of our modern outfits to go by, what secrets would our clothing reveal about our culture, our politics, and our everyday lives? It really makes you think about what you put on this morning. Anyway, thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing those little details, and I'll catch you next time.